Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be working on the CL again. Seems to be very popular content for you guys, so I'm happy to do this. One of the things that we're going to be doing today is doing a radiator and coolant flush on this car. What I've noticed is that the car heats up really quickly, and that can be a couple of things. We have maybe some obstruction within the radiator, or maybe the thermostat itself is starting to go. Now, my guess is that it's the original thermostat. From everything that I can tell, there was no thermostat replacement performed on this vehicle. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start by draining the fluid. We're going to then remove the radiator hoses and the thermostat. We're going to refill it with water and a radiator flush agent, and then we're going to let it run for a little while, let that work through. We got to turn the heater all the way up in the car while we do that, and it takes about 10 minutes according to the directions. So it's a fairly simple process, but it can be a little intimidating for people, so I figured I'd go through the step-by-step with you. To get started, we have to drain the coolant out of the vehicle, as you would imagine. So this is pretty common. There at the bottom, there's a little pepcock on the passenger side of the radiator. So you start by removing the radiator cap, and then we go ahead and remove the pepcock at the bottom. Just have a bucket available to catch it. And that part is very simple, so we'll go ahead and get started on that. So I wanted to start, before we actually drain the cooling, going over what we're going to be doing today a little bit more in depth. So I have a bottle of Prestone Radiator Flush and Cleaner. Very simple product. It has varying different directions based on how dirty your coolant is. Now, my coolant isn't that dirty, but I'm going to do this anyways. Basically, what we're going to be doing is a thermostat replacement, but I wanted to go ahead and do a flush at the same time. It just lends itself to cleaning out any debris or buildup or corrosion that may have occurred over the years. This is the original cooling system in this car from what I can tell. So it's always good to do some, light flushing as well as cleaning. We're also going to take the opportunity to replace some OEM parts. So I have the OEM radiator hose here. That's either I believe that is the top one. I could be wrong, that might be the bottom one, but there's your part number for reference on one of them, and here's your part number reference on the other one. For the radiator thermostat, we're going to be doing an OEM. So here is the thermostat, as well as the supply gasket that comes with it. While we're doing that, might as well give it some new clamps. So here's OEM clamps. You're going to need 4 of these. Part number is right there, but they are all the same. So now we can go ahead and get started on actually draining the coolant and refilling it with water and the flush. Making sure that you have a good functioning cooling system is important. Now what I've noticed is that the cooling of this vehicle has kind of declined, and so one of the things is we could have an obstruction, or we could have cooling issues with the thermostat opening and closing. So we're going to go ahead and address both of those issues with this. And now I'm going to go ahead and place the bucket underneath and find the pepcock, which like I said, is under the passenger side. And in proper fashion, it's not going to open easy. There we go. So we'll go ahead and let that drain out. While that's draining out, we can go ahead and prep our coolant hoses here. We'll go ahead and remove the joiner, which is this. That holds basically your lower and your upper radiator hose together. Set that off to the side. You can hear a dog in the background. I apologize. The dog is a coonhound, and he likes to bark at everything that goes by. So if you hear barking in the background, that is what that is. lights on because we're getting into the messy part. Now for this part you don't need anything other than water when we get to refilling it, but you'll also want to have your coolant available, and these radiators, the plastic ones from Honda, really require that blue Honda coolant, and there's an additive that's in there that kind of helps with the seals at the top where the aluminum core meets the plastic top here. And they switched over, I forget when, but a long time ago to the blue coolant because they were able to reformulate it and add some additional additives to it to keep that seal going. We'll go ahead and disconnect the upper radiator hose while this is draining. Fairly simple process. Hose clamps are just kind of squeezed together kind of. You also have to be careful that this is a plastic radiator top, so you don't want to crack your radiator, because then you'll obviously be going through a replacement procedure for your radiator. The reason why I'm doing the hoses, some of you may be curious, is because the hose looks to be a little brittle to me. This is the part that you have to be careful with. You just give it a good twist and then pull. That'll break the seal and the bond with the radiator and the hose. And then you just want to wiggle it out. And so you see, there we go. Let's check our bucket level. Our bucket level is pretty good. So we can keep on going here. So we're going to remove the upper radiator hose. Separate. The bond between those two items is too strong, unlike the plastic where you can kind of grab it and twist it. What we'll have to do here is cut a relief. Now, obviously, if you're going to be reusing your hoses, you wouldn't want to cut a relief, but we're going to do that because we know we're going to replace a hose. That. So interestingly enough, on the inside of this, there's definitely some deterioration of the hose. You can also see that it's deformed and actually bubbling right here at the top. This means that it's weakened, and you can tell that the structure here is a little bit better than the structure here. So that means that we have significant breakdown within the rubber. So you can see here we've got the upper radiator hose off, but then we also need to get this fan out. Now, you could probably do this without taking the fan off, but I'm going to do it with taking the fan off. I think it's going to be a little bit easier. 2 bolts that hold this on, and now it's ready to come out. What we do have to do is get the, take that radiator hose off, and now we'll go ahead and get the cruise control off. Should give us what we need to get this out. Tuck this up and over. Maybe it won't give us what we need. Does come out, it is a tight fit. Yep, and just as I suspected, now we can go ahead and reach the lower radiator hose. So the lower radiator hose now, the clamp is right here, accessible to some degree, definitely needs to be replaced. Looks like it's rusted pretty well through. So take that off now. Actually, you know what? We'll take the upper section off first, just because the coolant is still leaking out. On the upper radiator hose, on the lower radiator hose to the engine, there is a wire connector that's pretty close in proximity, so just be careful. You don't want to break that. As clamps are supposed to clip together to make removing them easier, but for some reason only 1 out of the 3 that I've been working with has been working. Okay, now we have that off. That's not going to come off either, so we're going to have to do the same process of essentially making a relief. So now we have both the upper and the lower radiator hose disconnected from the engine. This will now prepare us for the thermostat housing. The engine coolant temperature sensor is what is there for a wire connector like I mentioned. So we'll have to disconnect that. We can leave that plugged in for what we're trying to do. We don't need to remove it. So now we just need to remove the lower radiator hose and the clamp, and we can continue on. Okay, so here we are. We have the lower radiator hose out, and you can see where the rust had been building up. It looks like it was about to break through too. So that's very concerning. It's a good thing that we're going ahead and replacing this. Look at all that right there. That's basically dry rotted and rusted. So we would assume to have failed anyways. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and remove the thermostat and thermostat housing. Looks like it to be two 10mm bolts. I've already got the first top one loosened up, the other one's underneath. So we'll just get them to the point where we can use our hand here. So here's our comparison view. You can see obviously this one's been in there for quite a while, it's been tarnished. It doesn't look in bad condition, I would say, but you know, looks can be deceiving. There is a correct orientation. There's also temperature markings on this. You want to make sure that you get it right. As you can see here, this one's marked at 78 degrees Celsius. Also, there's the up. So make sure you get that right. We're not going to install that right now, though. What we're going to do is put the gasket back in. So here's our nice new upper radiator hose. And we can go ahead and attach it from here to here. Oh, maybe I got this wrong orientation. From here to here. And we'll put our new clamps on. Slide those over like that, and then prep our other one. And then we can go ahead and install our hose just like this. Now it's going to likely be a tight fit because the rubber is new. So just be careful that you don't over force it on. You just want to give it a nice kind of soft, gentle squeeze on there. There we go. That side's on. And I'm actually going to leave that one because I think it's going to obstruct my ability to get the lower radiator hose on. So we'll just do the top part for now. That's nice, snug on there, aligned correctly. Perfect. All right, now we'll do the lower. So at this point, we can go ahead and reconnect some of our items that we disconnected to gain access to. So like this breather hose, which will go on just temporarily while we do our flush, and then we'll disconnect it again. Overflow hose. Go ahead and take a look at what we have left in our overflow tank. Really nothing much there. Okay, so we're about ready to go ahead and fill this up with water. We'll close the petcock on the bottom. So at this point, we're at the point where we need to refill it with water. So the system is completely topped off. Now we want to put the radiator cap back on. Facing the right way. Okay, so now that we've got the coolant flush inside the radiator and we have filtered water in the radiator, I use a charcoal filter to fill that up so that it's clean water. We have to run the car for 10 minutes with the heater on high. So we'll go ahead and do that now. We might get a check engine light, we might not, hard to say. Okay, so we'll pick this back up after 10 minutes is complete. Alright, so where we're at right now is that we've run the engine for approximately 10 minutes, and now it's time to drain the coolant again with the solution that we put in there to help clean it out. So that's the next step. Then what we'll also want to do is drain the reservoir tank out. So over there is our reservoir tank. We'll go ahead and remove that. Once we drain and remove everything, we'll go ahead and remove the lower radiator hose from the thermostat housing. Go ahead and install the new thermostat. Refill the radiator and the overflow tank with Honda approved coolant, and that's pretty much how you do it. Okay, so to remove the expansion tank or the reservoir from the side, it basically just pulls out. So you remove the top and then lift it out. It just slides in on this little bracket right here, and what you'll want to do is drain this out. You'll want to clean it thoroughly before you then go ahead and put in your new coolant. Hey, I thought I'd bring you in to where we install the thermostat. So our thermostat is right here, and I've test fitted it in. What I want to show you is you want to line up that little dot with that little tab, because then it goes into the correct orientation. So your gasket and your thermostat looks like this, where the metal ring goes in between the two tabs within the gasket. And then you just install it this side up. And the reason why you do that is because then air will expel through here. That way you don't actually get what they call an airlock occurring. So we're going to put that back in. And it should just fit right in, real nice and snug. And then we put the housing back together. So after I get this all put back together, I'll go ahead and run through what we did. Okay, so at this point we've got the thermostat back in place. We've gone ahead and installed our upper and lower radiator hoses, and we've put the new clamps on. The fan shroud is back in place and reattached, which all pretty much went as you would expect it in reverse. So now what's left is we have to fill up the radiator and the overflow. Okay, at this point we've gone ahead and filled up our radiator with the Honda Type-2 antifreeze coolant. Now what's left is we have to run the engine and get the water pump moving to expel most of the air out of the system, and then top off as needed. So just as before, we want to make sure that we turn the heat all the way up in the car. That way the system will actually run through See some of the air bubbles that are coming out right now. Yep, there you go. There's another one. That's what we're talking about. That's why we have to run the heater core wide open, so heat full on. Make sure that the thermostat is opening. Make sure that all the air is expelled out of the system. Anytime that there's air in there, that's going to create a pocket of heat, and that pocket of heat will actually stay within the engine, and then you'll not actually move any of the coolant as you're expecting to, and the car will overheat. So you want to get all the air out. So there we have it. We went ahead and replaced the coolant. So as you can see, it wasn't that difficult of a task. If you're going to go ahead and do this, make sure that you give it plenty enough time between cycles to let it cool down. Use genuine Honda or Acura parts is my recommendation there. It makes everything so much easier, especially when you're talking about hoses and thermostats. Thermostats vary a little bit from manufacturer to manufacturer, and you always want to make sure that you're using the appropriate temperature thermostat. Otherwise, this is basically no different than draining and refilling it a couple times. The two bolts that hold the housing on are quite simple. The gasket and the thermostat itself were pretty easy to install. Overall, I would say that this is probably a 2 or a 3 out of 10 as far as the difficulty. More often than not, the difficulty will come with getting the clamps off. I think that was the most difficult thing. I don't have a proper tool to do that, so I was using pliers. All in all, though, it was pretty easy once you get past that. So, if this is something that you would like to do, I would say go ahead and do it. It's no different than changing like an oil or any other fluid within your car. Make sure that you keep things clean. Make sure that you do this routinely, about every year or two, I would say, depending on your driving conditions. I do mine every other year, so it ends up being about 2 years between cycles. And that just makes sure that you have a properly cooled car, and make sure that you use the correct coolant, because if you are winter driving, you don't want it to freeze. It'll lead to cracks in the block or cracks in your radiator. You definitely want to minimize all that. So hopefully you learned something here. Hopefully I demystified a little bit of this for you, and you feel apt to go ahead and do this yourself. Leave a comment if you want to talk to me about anything. Obviously I will reply to you, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.